What wins in a drag race, a Bugatti Chiron or the new Corvette ZR1X? Today, we're gonna find out exactly that. We're gonna do multiple drag races as well as some roll races to find out who's the king of straight lines.
A $4 million Bugatti Chiron with 1,500 horsepower.
We can see the 8-liter quad-turbo W16, and it has a W16 badge and a 1,500 for the 1,500 horsepower.
Against a Chevrolet Corvette, costing a fraction of that price. On paper, this shouldn't have been much of a contest. Then came 3 drag races on a scorching, unprepped stretch of Arizona tarmac, and the Corvette swept every single one, launching clean, while the Chiron spun its wheels, searching for grip. The Chiron finally struck back once the format shifted to a rolling start, proving raw horsepower still counts for something after all. Let's discuss how it happened, why it happened, and what the final verdict really says about horsepower on paper. The ultimate hypercar mismatch. Every legendary mismatch in automotive history starts with numbers that seem to settle the argument before a single tire ever spins. The Bugatti Chiron carries a quad-turbocharged 8-liter W16 engine, producing 1,500 horsepower, a figure that helped turn the car into the modern symbol of automotive excess the moment it debuted. Against that number sits the Chevrolet Corvette ZR1X, a twin-turbocharged 5.5-liter V8 paired with hybrid all-wheel drive, producing a combined 1,250 horsepower.
This is the Corvette ZR1X. It has 1,250 horsepower.
250 horsepower separates these machines on paper. Why would anyone expect that gap to close, let alone reverse, once the actual race began? Price tells an even more lopsided story than horsepower does. The Chiron carries a price tag hovering around $4 million, placing it firmly among the most expensive production cars ever built. The Corvette ZR1X, meanwhile, arrives at roughly $250,000.
Starting price tag above $200,000.
A figure closer to what many exotic SUVs command today than what a genuine hypercar rival should cost. 16 Corvette ZR1X models could be purchased for the price of a single Chiron, and still leave money on the table. Does a car costing that much less have any business sharing the same stretch of pavement as a machine built specifically to justify an 8-figure price difference? Weight adds yet another layer to this apparent mismatch, and not in the Corvette's favor at first glance. The Chiron tips the scales at roughly 4,300 pounds.
The car is not intended to be lightweight or light on its feet. It comes in at just under 4,600 pounds.
A genuinely massive figure for a car built around outright speed. Heavier cars typically struggle more with wheel spin off the line, particularly when power delivery arrives all at once rather than being metered out gradually. That should have been the Chiron's one disadvantage working in the Corvette's favor. Except the Corvette itself is no lightweight either, meaning this was never going to be a simple story about one car being dramatically lighter than the other. What makes this particular mismatch worth examining closely is not simply the gap in numbers, but what those numbers conveniently leave out. Horsepower figures describe an engine's potential, not necessarily how efficiently that potential reaches the pavement underneath 4 spinning tires. A car producing more raw power still has to translate that power into forward motion without simply spinning its wheels into smoke. And that translation depends on far more than what any spec sheet lists. This is exactly the gap the Chiron and the Corvette ZR1X were about to expose in front of a very surprised audience. Chevrolet's engineering choices throughout the ZR1X reveal a manufacturer keenly aware of exactly this dynamic. Rather than chasing horsepower for its own sake, the ZR1X pairs its twin turbocharged engine with hybrid all-wheel drive.
It's not full electric. It's a hybrid, yes. ZR1X, two big advantages. Number one, all-wheel drive.
Sending power to all four corners instantly, rather than relying on rear tires alone to manage over 1,000 horsepower. Chevrolet claims a 0 to 60 sprint in under 2 seconds, with a quarter-mile time in the mid-8-second range under ideal conditions. Numbers like that suggested the ZR1X was built specifically to solve the exact problem that tends to plague more powerful, rear-wheel biased hypercars the moment traction becomes a variable rather than a given. This particular showdown also came together through people rather than corporate marketing departments, which gave the entire event a different kind of credibility from the start. The Corvette arrived courtesy of its owner, while the Chiron came from a separate private collector, with two professional drivers assigned specifically to extract the maximum from each car under pressure. Neither car showed up as a factory-prepared showcase unit polished specifically for a marketing video. Both arrived as genuine, privately owned machines, driven by people with every incentive to represent their car honestly rather than favorably. Piloting either car under these specific conditions required a different kind of skill than simply mashing the throttle and hoping for the best. Neither driver had spent months training specifically on these exact vehicles the way a factory test driver might, meaning both were essentially learning each car's particular launch characteristics in real time, under pressure, with cameras rolling and a crowd watching closely. That unfamiliarity cuts both ways, adding genuine unpredictability to an event that might otherwise have felt like a scripted, foregone conclusion from the opening lights. The conditions. At Apex Motor Club, every drag race tells two stories. The story the cars are capable of on a perfect surface, and the story the actual conditions on race day force them to tell instead. This particular showdown took place at Apex Motor Club near Phoenix, Arizona.
That started this Apex racing, and tell us, what is this all about?
Sure, this is a motorsports country club, so think of golf, but with a racetrack instead of a golf course.
On a stretch of tarmac that was anything but perfect. Temperatures were already climbing past 80 degrees by 8 in the morning, and the surface itself was left deliberately unprepped, without the sticky racing compound typically applied to a professional drag strip. Why stage a showdown this significant on a surface that offered neither car a controlled advantage? Heat and an unprepped surface create exactly the kind of conditions that punish raw horsepower the hardest. Sticky, prepared drag strips help heavier, more powerful cars put that power down cleanly, minimizing wheel spin even under aggressive launches. Remove that prepared surface entirely, and suddenly a car's ability to manage traction becomes just as important as the numbers stamped on its spec sheet. Neither car received a controlled, ideal environment to prove its case. Both had to earn whatever result followed on exactly the same unforgiving stretch of pavement. Tire choice mattered just as much as the surface itself, and neither team reached for an artificial advantage. The Bugatti ran on Michelin Cup 2 tires, while the Corvette wore Michelin Pilot Sport 4S rubber, both genuine street-legal tires, rather than the drag radials teams sometimes use specifically to maximize a car's launch performance. Removing that variable entirely meant whatever happened next would reflect each car's actual engineering, not a hidden equipment advantage quietly tilting the result before the lights even dropped. The format itself added another layer of difficulty rarely discussed in casual comparisons between these two machines. Rather than a single decisive pass, this showdown unfolded across 3 separate standing start drag races, followed by a roll race rematch that began from a rolling 30 miles per hour rather than a dead stop. Multiple race formats meant neither car could simply get lucky once and claim the overall result. Consistency across different starting conditions would ultimately decide which car's engineering held up under the widest possible range of real-world scenarios. Technology built specifically into the Corvette gave its driver a genuine tool for managing exactly this kind of unpredictable surface. Chevrolet's custom launch control system allows the driver to fine-tune launch RPM and wheel slip directly from an auxiliary display inside the cabin, adjusting the car's behavior in real time, rather than relying on a single fixed factory setting. The Chiron, by contrast, relies on a more conventional launch system built primarily around a controlled, prepared surface, rather than the kind of unpredictable, scorching tarmac this event actually provided. Would that single piece of adjustable technology end up mattering more than an extra 250 horsepower once the lights finally dropped?
Fastest production car in the world, up to its top speed. That top speed is 253 miles per hour.
Documentation of the entire event mattered just as much as the racing itself, since as a result, this significantly needed verified timing data rather than simple visual impressions from trackside. Professional timing equipment tracked every launch, every gear change, and every finish line crossing throughout the day, creating a data trail that left little room for dispute afterward. Precise, verified numbers transform what could have been dismissed as a casual internet stunt into something closer to genuine, defensible evidence. The exact kind of proof this comparison needed to be taken seriously, well beyond the small crowd gathered trackside that morning. Behind the wheel sat two professional drivers, each tasked with extracting the absolute maximum from an unfamiliar car, under genuinely difficult conditions. Piloting a borrowed hypercar worth millions of dollars on an unprepped surface, in front of cameras, adds pressure that a spec sheet number could never capture. Every launch, every shift point, every decision made in a fraction of a second would end up amplified across the footage for the entire world to analyze afterward. That pressure applied equally to both sides of this particular showdown, regardless of which name appeared on the title of the car itself. 3 races, 1 result. When the lights finally dropped on the first standing start race, the mismatch on paper collided directly with the reality of an unprepped, scorching surface. The Chiron's rear tires broke loose almost immediately, spinning rather than gripping as 1,500 horsepower searched for traction it simply could not find. The Corvette, meanwhile, launched cleanly through its hybrid all-wheel drive system, translating its horsepower into forward motion almost instantly. By the halfway mark of the quarter mile, the Corvette had opened a lead of more than 10 car lengths, a gap the Chiron never came close to closing. The second race followed a similar pattern, though not without the Chiron putting up a stronger initial fight. This time, the Bugatti's driver found a slightly better launch, briefly jumping ahead in the opening moments of the race. That early advantage evaporated quickly, once the Corvette found its own rhythm, closing the gap and pulling away for another comfortable victory. 2 races into this showdown, a clear pattern had already emerged, one that no amount of raw horsepower seemed able to override on this particular surface. A third race only reinforced what the first 2 had already made clear. Results from this final standing start attempt mirrored the previous runs almost exactly, with the Corvette launching cleanly while the Chiron continued struggling for traction on the hot tarmac. 3 consecutive drag races, 3 consecutive Corvette victories, a sweep that transformed what many expected to be a formality into a genuine statement about what actually wins races when conditions refuse to cooperate with raw specification numbers alone. Recorded numbers from the event only deepened how remarkable this sweep actually was. The Chiron posted a 0 to 60 time of 3.28 seconds, an 1/8 mile time of 6.87 seconds, and a 1,000-foot time of 8.62 seconds. numbers that would embarrass nearly any other production car on Earth, yet still trailed the Corvette across the same stretch of pavement. How does a car capable of numbers that impressive still find itself beaten 3 times in a row by a rival, costing a fraction of its price? What made this sweep even more striking was how it happened. This was not a case of the Chiron suffering a mechanical issue or an obviously flawed setup. The car simply could not translate its raw power advantage into usable traction on an unprepped, scorching surface, while the Corvette's hybrid all-wheel drive system did exactly what it was engineered to do under precisely those conditions. Engineering built specifically to manage exactly this scenario had just been proven correct 3 times in a row in front of an audience that had arrived expecting an entirely different outcome. News of this sweep spread quickly well beyond the small crowd that witnessed it trackside, feeding directly into a wave of demand that was already building around the ZR1X before this event ever happened. Reports had already surfaced of early allocations selling for well above sticker price, despite General Motors reportedly discouraging that kind of immediate resale activity among early buyers. A car already generating that level of enthusiasm before proving itself against a genuine hypercar rival only gained further momentum once footage of this sweep began circulating. Enthusiasts did not need a marketing campaign to convince them something remarkable had just happened. They simply needed to watch the tape. Reactions from the small group gathered trackside that morning captured something the recorded numbers alone could never fully convey. Spectators who had come expecting a formality instead found themselves watching a genuine upset unfold in real time. The kind of moment that turns casual onlookers into people reaching immediately for their phones. Nobody needed a data readout to understand what they had just witnessed. The gap between the 2 cars was visible with the naked eye, close enough for spectators to feel the shift in the mood around them the moment that first race ended. The Chiron strikes back. Drag racing rewards a completely different set of engineering priorities than roll racing does, and the shift in format finally gave the Chiron a genuine opportunity to showcase what 1,500 horsepower can accomplish once traction stops being the deciding variable. Starting from a rolling 30 miles per hour rather than a dead stop, the first roll race unfolded very differently from everything that had come before it. A missed shift point cost the Corvette valuable momentum early in the run, and the Chiron capitalized immediately, surging ahead and claiming a clear, decisive victory in this opening roll race. That single result mattered enormously, and not simply as a consolation prize for Bugatti. It proved conclusively that the Chiron's raw power advantage was never actually gone. It had simply been masked by a launch scenario that never allowed it to fully express itself. Once wheel spin stopped being the deciding factor, the Chiron's true performance ceiling became immediately visible, reminding everyone watching exactly why this car earned its legendary reputation in the first place. Understanding exactly why that missed shift point cost the Corvette so much ground reveals just how unforgiving roll racing can be at this level of performance. A rolling start at 30 miles per hour requires a driver to already be in the correct gear, with the transmission primed to deliver maximum torque the instant the throttle opens fully. Selecting the wrong gear, or hesitating even briefly during that transition, costs precious fractions of a second that a car producing this much power simply cannot afford to give away against a rival with a quarter-mile head start in raw output. With the overall event now split between 2 very different formats and 2 very different winners, an obvious question lingers over the entire showdown once the tire smoke finally settles. Had a 4th, deciding race actually taken place under identical conditions to the tightest roll race rematch, which car would have ultimately claimed it? Neither team got the chance to settle that particular question definitively, leaving this rivalry technically unresolved beneath the overall scoreline, even as the broader pattern across every race told its own fairly convincing story regardless. A rematch followed almost immediately, and this time the margins narrowed considerably. The Corvette's driver corrected the earlier shift point mistake, locking into a cleaner gear sequence and returning to automatic shifting after the initial launch. What followed was the tightest battle of the entire showdown, with the Chiron surging hard through the middle portion of the run, while the Corvette held firm toward the top end, refusing to surrender the ground it had fought to reclaim. Which car actually deserved to be called the stronger performer, once both machines were finally allowed to compete on equal footing? Neither car walked away from the roll race portion with a clean, uncontested sweep, and that outcome tells its own important part of this story. The Chiron's raw power genuinely mattered once traction stopped limiting how much of that power could reach the pavement. The Corvette's refusal to fold under pressure, even after an early mistake, revealed a driver and engineering package capable of adapting mid-contest rather than relying entirely on a single strong launch. This was no longer a story about one car dominating the other completely. It had become a story about two philosophies, each proving correct under slightly different conditions. The final verdict. Strip away the spectacle, and what remains from this entire showdown is a far more nuanced verdict than either side's supporters likely expected walking in. The Corvette ZR1X swept all three standing start drag races convincingly, proving that hybrid all-wheel drive engineering and instant torque delivery can overcome a significant horsepower deficit when traction becomes the deciding variable. The Chiron, meanwhile, reclaimed its advantage the moment the format shifted toward a rolling start, proving that raw horsepower still matters enormously once wheel spin stops being the primary obstacle standing in its way. Price versus performance forms perhaps the most uncomfortable question sitting underneath this entire comparison. A car costing roughly 1/16 of its rival's price won the majority of races contested across this event outright. Does that outcome diminish what Bugatti has built with the Chiron, a car that remains, even after this result, one of the most respected hypercars ever produced? Or does it simply prove that American engineering has finally closed a gap many assumed would always remain permanently out of reach? Skeptics will point out, fairly, that this was never a sanctioned professional competition with governing body oversight, and that an asterisk of some kind belongs beside any result generated outside a fully controlled testing environment. That criticism deserves acknowledgement rather than dismissal. But independently verified timing equipment, 2 professional drivers, and 3 consecutive clean results are difficult to wave away entirely as a fluke. Does a result need a governing body's stamp of approval to still mean something real to the people who witnessed it firsthand? Conditions clearly shaped this outcome as much as engineering did, and any honest accounting of this showdown has to acknowledge that reality directly. A cooler day, a properly prepared surface, or a different tire compound could plausibly have shifted these specific results in the Chiron's favor. Real-world conditions rarely offer the controlled fairness a laboratory test might provide, and that unpredictability is exactly what made this particular showdown so genuinely compelling to watch unfold in real time. Beyond this single afternoon, the broader implications ripple across an entire industry currently rethinking what a hypercar even needs to cost. For decades, the assumption held firm that genuine hypercar performance required a price tag reaching well into 7 or 8 figures, with anything more affordable relegated to a different, lesser conversation entirely. A result like this one complicates that assumption directly, forcing manufacturers to reconsider exactly how much of a hypercar's price tag reflects genuine engineering advantage, and how much simply reflects exclusivity that no longer guarantees victory once real pavement enters the equation. None of this diminishes what the Chiron has already accomplished across its entire production run, and it would be a mistake to read this single event as any kind of final verdict on the car's overall legacy. The Chiron remains one of the most respected, technically remarkable hypercars ever built, a genuine landmark, regardless of what happened on one hot Arizona morning. Losing 3 drag races on an unprepped surface does not erase a decade of engineering excellence. It simply proves that even legends occasionally meet a rival, and a set of conditions they were not specifically built to answer. A rematch on a properly prepared surface remains entirely possible, and would settle at least one lingering question this event left open. Both teams walked away from Apex Motor Club with legitimate reasons to request better conditions before accepting any result as truly final. Whether that rematch ever actually happens depends on whether either side believes the outcome would genuinely change, or whether both already suspect the story might simply repeat itself under a cleaner surface and a cooler morning. What this event ultimately demonstrated extends well beyond a single afternoon at an Arizona drag strip. Horsepower numbers on a spec sheet describe potential, not guaranteed outcomes, and potential only translates into results once engineering, conditions, and execution all align at exactly the right moment. The Corvette ZR1X proved that combination can overcome a massive price and power deficit under the right circumstances. The Chiron proved that raw power still finds a way to matter once those specific circumstances shift even slightly. Neither lesson cancels out the other, and both linger long after the tire smoke finally cleared from that Arizona tarmac. So what does horsepower on paper actually mean once real pavement gets involved? Not nearly as much as the spec sheet wants you to believe. A $4 million hypercar lost 3 straight drag races to a car costing a fraction of its price, then reminded everyone exactly why it earned its reputation once the format finally changed for good. Neither number told the whole story on its own. If this showdown changed how you look at horsepower, hit like, drop your verdict in the comments, and subscribe for more, because this rivalry is far from finished.